Hey, it's Donovan again. I thought I would introduce an information set that usually would fall under the purview of something kind of not so much, well, right wing now, but would really be more culturally conservative. A lot of white liberals don't really understand that the reason why black people were doing so well in the 1940s and 50s, post World War II, compared to now, at say the rate at which whole families rose out of poverty was like the fastest, I believe, in the modernized world at that for a number of decades. There was no other group in the world that can match the rate of literacy. Was it blacks were more literate than the average Estonian or Latvian in the night until like the 1950s. Like say if it was like 1915, like an Estonian, it was more likely they were illiterate and that black Americans were literate. Most of the time, literacy was passed on through the Bible. It also, yeah. So, musical societies, these were offshoots of fraternal orders. That is why you have the kind of music that exists in New Orleans. That's the remnants of musical societies. Another example of a musical society that you've all seen the works of is Bob Marley. Bob Marley was it? I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Not Mad Professor. Lee Scratch Perry. He was one of that came out of Catholic school. It was a nun who taught them all music. They were very well formally trained. A lot of the greatest of early jazz, they were all Black Freemasons. A lot of white liberals don't get that that's what they're dealing with when they're dealing with the Democratic Party. They're dealing with sort of Black Freemasonic people, that tier of society, managing poor people. But you all don't get this. What I would suggest you do is look up on YouTube the Black Stone Rangers, or the Blackstone Rangers. And it was the El Rukins are also what they became known as. And you look up the Gangland episodes. This will give you a very good idea of why Chicago is the way it is and why a lot of cities are the way they are. Because you just know nothing about over the coffee table stuff in the black community. You don't attend those churches. You aren't really around them. You don't use 1006 lotion. You've never used pink hair oil moisturizer. You've never used any of that. So you just don't know. You think you know, but you don't, because you listen to rap music or something and you like black people in Queen Bey and shit like that. But you don't really understand why certain families have always been in charge, why there's black people who everybody in the family is a firefighter or police officer. And that's a real thing. And they do not see themselves as the same kind of people as a lot of the people they have to kind of manage. And that's what it's becoming now. It's becoming they have to manage them. And a lot of these black law enforcement officers, these people are being held hostage in their communities now because white liberals keep celebrating these very, very dangerous young men who get themselves killed by police and people like George Zimmerman. And you don't have to care. That's the thing. You don't have to care. You pay no consequences. You have no feelings. None of your feels matter. You do not ever get your head kicked in by these guys. So you don't believe they exist. You don't believe that cats just fuck people up because they're not from the hood. They're like, oh, you're on our bus. No, nobody's on their bus. No, that bus just goes through their neighborhood. But they get to rob you because you're on their bus. It's prison thinking. It's Savannah tribal, like pre-copper coins kind of thinking. Visiting the first world. And it's happened within one generation. Since the welfare state, one generation. In a way. Is also kind of left over from a kind of earlier groups that came later from the South and joined up with Northerners who were not necessarily ever lived in the South. That these were people who they knew nothing about Southern culture or any of that. A lot of black culture is simply Southern culture, and whites stopped doing it because it didn't pay, or they still do it and you see them. Because a lot of you hate white people and you love talking about these ones that act like the first white people who got here, who cleared all the swamps, dug out all the first stones and all that, and then were just sent into the hinterland to fucking forage. You all love it. A lot of you leftists love this because you love borrowing their music, their folky, oaky music, and you love warping the lyrics and stuff, like Devil Makes Three types and shit like that. All right. From Moorish science to the Nation of Islam. New thought type positive thinking for spiritual and material transformation would remain part of black nationalism even after Garvey, especially in the shape of Moorish science, which would also draw from Freemasonry as well as from Rosicrucianism and Islam. The architect of this new religion was Noble Drew Ali. Little is known about him since, like some others that have served as modern-day authorities on arcane knowledge, Noble Drew Ali created something of a mythology around himself, or at least appears not to have dissuaded its creation. One legend suggests that his mother was a member of the Cherokee tribe, or that he was adopted by Cherokees in early life. Another suggests that he was adopted by gypsies. However, Noble Drew Ali was probably born Timothy Drew on January 8, 1886 in North Carolina. His parents may have been former slaves, and his father, so one account suggests, was of Moorish extraction. As a young man, Noble Drew Ali traveled to the north of the United States of America, and in either 1912 or 1913 founded the Canaanite Temple of Moorish Science in Newark, New Jersey. A decade later, and the new faith had temples in West Virginia, Arkansas, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, Michigan, and elsewhere, with its membership numbering possibly 30,000. But with growth came new challenges. Factions began to form within the movement, and in 1925, Noble Drew Ali relocated to Chicago. There he continued to spread his doctrines. And the following year, he incorporated his organization under the name Moorish Temple of Science. It is possible that Noble Drew Ali learned something of Islam from Ahmadiyya Muslims, who had already established communities in the United States of America, founded in India by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who is generally regarded by Ahmadiyyas as the Mahdi, or final prophet of Islam. The sect is markedly different from mainstream Sunni Islam, which often views it as a schism. Peter Lamborn Wilson has also noted the claim that Drew's parents had met Sayyid Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani in Newark during 1882 or 1883, a few years before the birth of Timothy, and that they were not only initiated into the Salafiyya, Afghani's political reform movement, but also into the Brethren of Purity, the Ikhwan al-Safa. However, though widely traveled, al-Afghani never visited the United States. Nevertheless, it is possible that the founder of Moorish science at least knew of and was perhaps even encouraged by al-Afghani's anti-colonial doctrine, which could easily have been absorbed into some segments of the small Muslim communities then in the United States of America, which is not entirely different from Moorish science's political platform. The brethren of purity, as Wilson himself notes, was in fact a 10th or 11th century esoteric Islamic brotherhood influenced by Neoplatonism as well as by Judaism and Christianity. Highly unorthodox from the perspective of mainstream Sunni Islam, and perhaps somewhat more in line with the New Age and alternative spiritual movements of the 20th century than with Islam in many respects, the Brethren of Purity could be considered a spiritual forerunner of Moorish science. Notably, Noble Drew Ali even proclaimed that the faith he had founded, quote, honors all the divine prophets, unquote, which unusually in Moorish science included not just Jesus and Mohammed, but more controversially also Buddha and Confucius. Try to keep it smooth. Despite claiming that his organization practiced the Islamic faith of the ancient Moors, Noble Drew Ali derived inspiration from a range of sources from the Holy Book for the Holy Book of Moorish Science. The Circle 7 Quran, or to give the book its full title, the Holy Quran of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science 7, know yourself and your Father, God Allah, that you learn to love instead of hate. Every man need to worship under his own vine and fig tree, the uniting of Asia, making only minor changes to superficially Islamize the text used. The prophet of Moorish science adopted several passages from the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ by Levi Dowling, 1908, an essentially proto-New Age work that claimed that the young Jesus had traveled through India learning the mysteries. Dowling lived in Ohio, but claimed to have received revelation about Jesus from the Akashic Record, quote unquote, a metaphysical record of all events, past, present, and future. Sorry if I'm being a bit facetious. Oh, yeah. This is quite apropos, because we're out in space, baby, talking about Circle 7 Quran. Got you all in check. Another influence on the Circle 7 Quran was a work called Unto Thee I Grant. This is actually a pretty cool book. This book was ultimately derived from The Economy of Human Life, a guide to manners published in Britain in 1750. The latter was republished in several expanded versions during the same century, though Unto Thee I Grant was published in 1925 by the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucis, or AMORC, an American self-styled Rosicrucian order based in San Jose, California. AMORC, says Mitch Horowitz, build it as the secret teachings of Tibet. And they do. They totally do. The copy I have. Though the ultimate source of the text is claimed to be Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who is believed to have authored it somewhere between 1360 and 1350 BC. So I thought I would just read a little bit from Mr. Angel Millar's The Crescent and the Compass, because people do need to understand there is much more going on in the Black Lives Matter movement than any of you understand. It's just very few of you who are on the left really, you have a hard time understanding other cultures. You weren't raised in a multicultural world. You weren't raised being the only person at the table who doesn't speak the language, and that it's perfectly fine that nobody is addressing you in English. That's the idea I'm getting. None of you have really lived the real, true multicultural life where you have to know if people are saying that they're going to jump you or rob you in another language. That is what it is. That you don't date women from a different ethnic group because that's not done. Like, you don't really live in that. And I grew up in that. And so the left, I never quite understood a lot of what you all think, because there'd be stuff that I'm like, don't you know about this? And you all didn't. And because I didn't have an internet connection for many different parts of my life, I had no way of looking a lot of this stuff up. So now, wonderfully, there's people like Angel Millar who are publishing a lot of this information about the extent to which Masonic, Odd Fellowship, Freemasonry, and other fraternal orders were extremely important to various groups of people around the world and the course of history. Most of you don't understand that part, probably won't understand that part where I emphasize Salafia. That's Salafism. That was a Freemasonic, that was like H.P. Blavatsky milieu of people. That came out of, I think, the Memphis Mitzrayim people in Egypt, like the lodges there. Like, a lot of you don't get that this was just like a well-funded anti-colonial movement to reform Islam and make it like what it says in the Quran, make it exactly like what it says in the Quran, with no other interpretations. And you all won't accept that. You won't accept that is what you're seeing. You simply won't. It doesn't matter if I sent you that book, if I bought you a copy, you wouldn't care. And you don't really want to understand the Black community and why things are falling apart, why there's these people who stay married and they do fine. They do absolutely the same as their white neighbors. And then there's the people who are raised in single-family homes and their neighborhood is insane, and they get shot by police all the time, or all the time. Actually, quite rarely, really, they get shot by each other all the time, and you just won't accept it. And so that's a bunch of references. I suggest you try to contest the author, or just leave something stupid in the comments, and I'll gladly ignore it. But I would suggest just look up what was in there. Look up Noble Drew Ali. Look up YouTube videos on him. You really want to learn about Black people? Especially you white liberal chicks. You should look those videos up.